We have lots of updates today, including the latest trade talk around teams like the Calgary Flames, New Jersey Devils, and the Ottawa Senators. We also have some significant updates from the NHL waiver wire. We had 2 players be claimed today and another veteran placed on waivers. Plus, tonight is Patrick Roy's return to Montreal. His first time visiting his old stomping grounds with the New York Islanders. We've got the latest updates on a potential return for Parise. And is it possible or even likely that the Arizona Coyotes could end up in Salt Lake City as early as next year? We'll discuss that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today, so let's dive right in and get started. First up, I just want to quickly discuss the fact that tonight is Patrick Roy's return to Montreal. Of course, he's only been coaching the New York Islanders just for a short few days. He's got 2 games in, and the return to his old stomping grounds is already happening. So certainly Patrick Roy likely going to get a big, I'm sure, big round of applause from the fans. It's going to be a little bit of a circus, I'm sure. I know he's really cautious, wants to make sure it doesn't impact the team, doesn't want to be a distraction. But we'll certainly be curious to see the reaction to him. Of course, coaching against Marty St. Louis for the first time. I know St. Louis never played in Montreal, but obviously another, NHL legend from the area, from the province of Quebec. So we'll see how Patrick Roy's return goes in Montreal tonight. As I mentioned as well, it's been a busy day on the NHL waiver wire. We have 2 waiver claims. Yesterday, the Calgary Flames had placed 2 players on waivers, and they were both picked up. So they lost 2 players and not able to assign them to the minors. First up, Adam Ruzicka was claimed by the Arizona Coyotes. So of course they have, they're doing okay this year for sure. But if there's one area that they probably wanted to add some depth on, it was the center ice position, and Ruzicka can do that. He's got good size. Certainly like what he could potentially bring for, probably more like ideally like a third line role, but they like the centerman. The word was that they like his size and mobility, and we'll see if he can be a little bit more consistent. I know in Calgary, it's not that the Flames didn't like him. There was lots to like, but I think it was more of an inconsistency issue in his play. So Ruzicka is now a Coyote, and defenseman Nick DeSimone was also placed on waivers and was picked up by the New Jersey Devils. Obviously, the Devils, had a couple of players that they lost yesterday to a leave of absence with Michael McLeod and Cal Foote. So certainly, the Devils are going to be a team that we're going to talk about here a little bit further in just a few moments' time. But not a big surprise to see them pick up a waiver claim in DeSimone, who can kind of fill some depth on their roster. Now, we also got a pretty, I don't know how to describe this, but a longtime veteran. It's not like he's a huge name, but Nick Bonino of the New York Rangers is on waivers today. Not in some ways surprising, in some ways not. Obviously, the Rangers have had their ups and downs lately since the winter break or the holiday break, whatever you want to call it. They haven't played the best. Bonino's appeared in 45 games this year. He's got 1 goal, I think 5 points. Obviously more of a fourth line player at this point in his career, has been for some time. He signed to a 1-year deal at $800K. So this, I think, is more than anything. I'm not sure that he's going to be reassigned to the minors if he's not picked up. I think by Chris Drury, I think this is probably a situation where they had a conversation and just said, you know what, we're going to try to see if we can't find another opportunity for you and to see if another team would pick him up. That's likely what this is, just giving him, out of respect, giving him a chance to go somewhere else. I don't know, like I said, if he clears, if they'll actually send him to the minors or not. Bonino hasn't played in the minors in well over a decade, so we'll see what tomorrow brings once 2 o'clock Eastern time comes. Because he's on a pending UFA and a really cheap contract, maybe there's a team out there that would like to have some veteran depth that'll pick him up. We'll see where things go on that front. A couple other quick updates as well, and some injuries, and then we're going to get into some of the rumors around the league. Calgary, of course, has recalled Walker Dufour. Of course, he just recently cleared waivers and was reassigned. He's already getting a chance to come back up. Obviously, a roster spot created by the leave of absence by Dylan Dubé will likely play a role in that happening. The Columbus Blue Jackets today activated Zach Werenski, and once again David Jiricek back to the American Hockey League. He's been up and down a lot and has barely played in the NHL, so certainly they want to get him more playing time. I'm not sure why they keep calling him up and having him sit. It doesn't make any sense. I've been really confused at how they've handled some of their young players there in the Jackets organization. Now, New Jersey is the team I want to talk about. A couple of things. First, with some injuries and some updates, and then I think we're going to maybe see some action in New Jersey here soon when it comes to some potential trades. But they've retroactively placed centerman Jack Hughes on injured reserve dating back to January the 5th. Of course, that was required to officially make a roster spot. Dougie Hamilton has finally also been moved to long-term injured reserve. It's still not 100% clear that he's going to be out for the remainder of the season, but a lot of people suspect that's quite likely. Obviously, the Devils create a big pool of money they can now use through LTIR because of the Hamilton contract. Obviously, they had 2 players, like I said, leave on a leave of absences yesterday. Now, of course, Cal Foote didn't play a huge role, but Michael McLeod's been a pretty important player for them this year, with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier both having lengthy absences from the lineup. McLeod's having a career season and was able to produce at a much higher level and get much more of a bigger role. And now he's not there, and I suspect there's a pretty good chance that these players on leave of absences, we don't know for sure, but they can't guarantee anything that they're going to be back this year, right? Because it's so many question marks and unknown. So, because of that, I think New Jersey is likely to make some moves. Now, like I said, moving Hamilton to LTIR opens things up. They do have lots of interesting young players. If they want to make a package or two to get some help, certainly, a defenseman, a goalie, a forward, I think they could use help across the board, to be honest. Goaltending's been an issue. They've been linked to a player like a John Gibson before. Not quite sure if that's still something that they're looking at, but definitely goaltending help for sure. Obviously, help on the blue line. They did claim Nick DeSimone, like I said, on waivers today, so that's part of the solution, but certainly they probably could use a player that can play higher in the lineup and just a little bit more capable than him right now. And instead, obviously, with all the injuries and obviously the loss of McLeod, they could use somebody at forward, probably preferably a center, although they do have some guys that are not always a center that have experience playing center, like Mercer and Howland. Players like that can certainly go into the middle when called upon, but can also play the wing. So I'm not sure what their move will be, but they could use help all over the place. And I can't help but think that some of the top names that make sense for New Jersey are the players available on the Flames. Like I said, we don't know for sure if Noah Hannifin's going to be dealt or signed by the Flames, but he would be a tremendous pickup for them. I think he makes a ton of sense for the Devils. At the same time, so does Chris Tanev. Now, doesn't mean that they're going to go for both. I really don't think they would, but we know that both are unsigned right now, and there's lots of rumors and speculation they could both be dealt. And I can see one of them for sure. You can make an argument for each, to be completely honest. It might even make more sense to go for Tanev, given the fact that they have, a young, dynamic guy like Luke Hughes who can provide a lot of offense and puck moving. Tanev's more of your stay-at-home guy. Of course, he helped his brother Quinn a lot early in his career. He could do the same thing for Luke and being a partner there. So, they also have Nemec in New Jersey, who's also young and obviously a bright future, but when they're young like that, they're still kind of prone to making some mistakes here and there. They could use some more veteran help back there, especially with Hamilton being out as well. So we'll see, but a blue liner of that caliber would make sense. Elias Lindholm name certainly comes to mind. Obviously a great forward centerman. He's not having the greatest season, but he's certainly fully capable of getting things going. We've even heard Tyler Toffoli's name out there. Now, of course, I wouldn't suspect Toffoli to be traded back to the Flames by any means, but Toffoli's name has been out there as well because there's some uncertainty if the Devils are going to sign him and retain his services or if they might consider using him as part of a package. Now, I think Toffoli's played pretty well for the Devils, so it's not like it hasn't worked out and they definitely want to move on or anything of that nature. So it's not really clear what that holds as far as what his future is and the plans for Toffoli. But I can see the Devils, now that they have some LTIR availability, really, if you think about it, where they are at in the standings and where they're at in the season, they just got a blow to their roster. I don't know what they knew or didn't know ahead of time. But, now they're down Jack Hughes and Michael McLeod, two of the top three centers. So clearly that's a big hole. So I wonder if we'll see Fitzgerald react and make a move. We'll see what happens. But certainly some interesting names there. I think the guys with the Flames just make a lot of sense. Not that they're the only ones out there. There's other guys too that could be a possible good fit. We might be seeing a return to the NHL for Zach Parise. Of course, a longtime Devil, Minnesota Wild, and of course, more recently, New York Islander player. has been training at home in Minnesota for quite some time. It's believed he's likely going to sign and play the remainder of the season sometime soon-ish. As long as he's signed and on a roster before the NHL trade deadline, he'll be able to play the remainder of the regular season and be eligible for playoffs. A lot of people suspected if he was going to return, it would be the New York Islanders. And now the latest intel, though, says that, and this comes from, I believe it was Michael Russo, who would be well connected to the Minnesota area, says that he's heard intel and sources say that there's a good chance he's going to sign with the Colorado Avalanche. Now, obviously the Avalanche are a team that would want to add. If they can get a guy like Parise and not have to give up assets, that would be great for them. If Parise plays anything like he did the last year or two, he can still be a contributor, probably be more of a top 9 player, like a third liner who can move up if need be. Lots of experience, still skates well. So we'll have to see. I don't know if I completely rule out the Islanders. Clearly, they just made a coaching change, and obviously the changes might be appealing there. We know the Islanders appear to be open to trading Oliver Wahlstrom, maybe moving Wahlstrom, signing Parise. There's ways that the Islanders could do it. So I don't know really what their odds are. Right now, we've only heard the Avalanche, and it could be happening in the near future. Now, of course, as well, big news story yesterday was the players of the 2018 Canadian World Junior team. Of course, we heard and seen several players on that team take a leave of absence. People are drawing connecting the dots, so to speak, and assuming that they're the 5 players that are rumored to be facing charges. They said the intel from the Globe and Mail and Robin Doolittle said that there's 5 players that have been asked by London police to surrender and face charges. And a lot of people think, well, there's 5 players on leave. That must be the players. And we can't say with certainty that it is, but people are connecting the dots and making those assumptions. But what I want to talk about here today mostly is how this impacts the teams. Clearly, we know that there's a lot going on. Obviously, we have all our opinions from the legal world. I hope that there's justice for the victim. I really hope that everything is, handled appropriately. But from a business perspective, what does it mean for the teams that have lost players now, and how does it impact them? So for right now, and this comes from confirmed by dailyfaceoff.com, is that the NHL players on leave are still being paid. They do count against the salary cap, but they're listed as non-roster players, so they can be replaced on the roster. So roster spots become available, they go on leave, but their salary is still factored into their cap. Now, on February the 5th, this is what we've also learned, which I don't know if we got it in a video yesterday, I think we did last night, but we know now that on February the 5th, the London Police Department is expected to hold a press conference, and it's believed, all they've said, but there's going to be an update on the investigation. At that point, it's believed, and people are assuming, that these players that have been requested to surrender will have done so. Then it'll be announced that they're facing charges or whatever. That could happen. I don't know that it's a guarantee, but that's what a lot of people expect and assume is going to go down. Now, with the way the CBA is worded, my interpretation of it, at least, it looks like that when a player is facing charges and are facing legal consequences like that, that's the point they can be suspended. And to be reinstated, they're going to have to be approved by the commissioner. Okay, so most likely, if everything goes down the way people are assuming here, the 5 players, regardless if they're the 5 players that are on leave right now or anybody else, will be, assuming they all do what they're asked to do here and surrender to police, they'll be charged, and then obviously that'll have to go to court. Now, obviously, they're all going to have their own lawyers. They could be out on bail. There could be different arrangements in that sense. We don't know. That's not really relevant to the CBA and the business side of hockey, because how it's going to work at that point is once they're formally charged, assuming that does happen, then the NHL can suspend the players. Once they're suspended, then it's a whole different scenario with the salary cap and things are different. But for right now, they're still being paid. They won't be paid once they're suspended. So obviously, completely different scenario. Now, of course, the other thing that I suspect is that the players would probably be suspended indefinitely because we don't know what kind of timelines it's even going to be to get through the legal process. And then if there's always, find out if they're going to be guilty or not guilty or what have you. I think it's going to be a case that they'll be suspended indefinitely pending charges, and that once the legal process is done, and assuming, because we don't know what kind of repercussions there's going to be, at some point in the future, they would have to meet with the commissioner and try to get themselves reinstated. So it's quite fair to say that if these players do face charges and do end up going to jail or anything of that nature, that their careers are most likely done, or at least for a very long time. So, and after being out of the game for that length of a period of time, you would think the odds of a return are probably slim, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We don't know what that's going to be, but that's just kind of what's expected. And the main thing I want to cover here tonight is how it affects those teams from a cap and business perspective right now. Like I said, that process could change if charges are laid and everything changes on February 5th once the London police make their announcements. Now, the other thing here as well, it's also word from Frank Seravalli of dailyfaceoff.com on his podcast, the DFL Rundown, because of course we know the other story that came out yesterday, which kind of was, I wasn't happy about it because I believe it was meant as a distraction from that story, was about the Ryan Smith group out of Utah, basically pleading with the NHL to open up its expansion process. But like I said yesterday, one of the key things in the letter that was made public that we were able to read through was that it says in there that they're ready and able to take on an NHL team immediately, and that the current arena, which I believe is called the Delta Center, can be immediately house a franchise. So Frank Seravalli on his podcast that I said he fully expects that the Arizona Coyotes will relocate to Utah. Now, I know Coyotes fans don't want to hear that, and I know that from what we're hearing, the Coyotes are still working on a long-term solution for their arena. A lot of people there was a date of the All-Star break put out there previously by the league and by the team, if I'm not mistaken, that they'd like to see something in place by then. Now, was that a hard and fast date? No. So, obviously the All-Star break's right around the corner. I don't think we're going to get news of a relocation like next week or even next month. I really don't. But I do think the timing of that was not only to distract you from the Hockey Canada story, but at the same time, I think it's also to put some pressure on Arizona, saying we're basically here to take your team. So essentially, in that case, if it happened, they would buy the team from the current Coyote owners, pay a big relocation fee, we don't know what it would be exactly, and move them. They would become the Coyotes' new owners, and they would operate in Salt Lake City. Now, the thing with that is that arena might not be perfect. It was designed as like a basketball-first arena. Could be a similar scenario that we saw the Islanders do with Barclays Center, where there was obviously some parts of the arena wasn't great viewing and stuff, but they could still get a lot more people in the arena and have a much bigger crowd than they can have a Mullet Arena in Tempe. So that's certainly a step forward in that sense, and they are bidding to host the Olympics in 2020 or 2034. And assuming they get that bid, which they're expected to at this point, I believe they're the front runners, that if they have that confirmed, Frank says they can probably have an arena built probably within, let's say, even at most, say 3 years. So maybe by 26 or 27, probably say 2027, probably fair to say, they could have a new arena for that new team and then used for the Olympics. So it's not unreasonable to think that as much as this group really wants expansion, that if things don't work out with the Coyotes, they're going to be shuffled over there. Like I said before, if the Coyotes do have to move, they're going to want to keep them in the Western Conference. They're going to want to keep them in an area that works for the Central Division. They're going to want to keep them in an area that is minimal disruption as possible. And that, to me, checks all the boxes. So clearly, I do think Frank's on to something. I think it's a little bit early to say it's happening for sure. It's not. If you think about when the Jets were getting their team back when they relocated from Atlanta, I believe it was sometime in May when the NHL announced it. And then, of course, they started playing that fall. So they do need some time. Now, are we at a hard and fast deadline? No, we are not. But it's getting closer. Time is ticking here. And I would think, within the next month or 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, it's getting to that point where the NHL is, even though that wasn't a hard and fast time of the All-Star break, it's going to be okay, it's put up or shut up. It's getting close. So we'll see what happens. Now, some more trade rumors as well before we go. Obviously, we talked a bit about the Devils and some connections there. The Senators got a lot of attention today as well. General Manager and President Steve Staios spoke to the media today, confirmed a few things, Jacques Martin would be the head coach for the remainder of the season. Sounds like they're not in any big rush and that They're most likely going to find their new long-term permanent solution in the spring once the season is over. I don't know that Jacques Martin, to be honest, as much as he's a great coach, he can't go on the ice. He's got really bad hips and knees, and he's in his 70s. He's yet to get on the ice for a practice, so I don't know that long-term it really makes sense. Like, his mind is great. I think he can do a lot of good things. I would be pretty surprised if he didn't continue to work with the organization in some capacity, whether it be either some type of assistant, associate coach, consultant. I don't know what they'll call him, but I would suspect that he'll stick around in some capacity because he's got a great mind for the business and for the players, and obviously, could help the transition period. So we'll see where that goes, but he's definitely staying on for the remainder of the year. They did talk about the fact about their pending UFAs. Obviously, Staios didn't come out and say what his plans were, but it sounds like Dominic Kubalik, I think, is a player we can fully expect to get moved. I don't know there's going to be much of a return, but Kubalik's a guy that I expect to be available and likely go. When it comes to Tarasenko, he was asked about Tarasenko and the fact that he has a no-move clause and is a pending free agent. Basically, Staios said with Tarasenko that he has not spoken to him yet about any of that stuff, but given where they are in the standings, that he certainly understands why people think that, it could be a case where he is moved, and that they'll kind of wait and see where things go and probably have that conversation a little bit later. But he also did a radio hit afterwards on TSN 1200, I think it was, and he said it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that they could re-sign Tarasenko. He went on, kind of gushed about how happy he was with Tarasenko and said how that he didn't know a lot about the player, on a personal level, and he'd seen him play, but he got to learn a lot more about him since he's been in Ottawa. He's been impressed with how he plays at both ends of the ice. He's been productive. We've heard reports that Tarasenko's family has actually been pleasantly happy in Ottawa. Plus, he has a no-move clause. If he decides that, I really don't want to chase a cup this spring and I want to stay put, then they can't move him, right? So that's going to be a mutual conversation if it does happen. But I wouldn't rule out. I think it's more likely a trade than a re-sign, an extension. But I do think it's possible. I do think there is some mutual interest there, and we'll see where that goes. But hard to say. Depends on what the offers are, too. That's going to play a role. And they did talk a bit about Jacob Chychrun, and Steve Staios said he was very disappointed to hear Chychrun's name out there. Said he felt bad for him. He said essentially that what we had heard before, that Chychrun absolutely loves being in Ottawa. And he said, he understands the fact that, with him not having a long-term contract, that part of it is fine. But then we've also heard from reporters like Ian Mendez, who had done a story and done an interview with Chychrun when they were in Montreal just a few days ago. And what Chychrun wanted to really get across in this interview was that he's like, he understands the business side. He understands they have Chychrun, Sanderson, Shabbat, three really good left shot D who are all very offensive. You might not be able to keep them all. He also said that, the reports that he really wanted to dispute and really kind of upset him was the one saying that he wasn't happy being in Ottawa anymore. He said, I absolutely love it here. It's like a dream come true. He said, I bought a house and I'm not renting. I bought a property. I bought a house here. I live 5 minutes from my sister. I live 10 minutes from my grandpa. Why would I want to leave? He's like, I absolutely love it here. So to be honest, Chychrun understands that, the business side, and it's not a given he gets re-signed and stays, just given the dynamic of the blue line and given the dynamic of the contracts and the cap. But if Chychrun is moved, it's not going to be because he does not like Ottawa, and it's not going to be because that he's unhappy. It's just going to be strictly a business decision. But Staios also reiterated that Chychrun plays the right side and that he's pretty good at it, and that they are confident that if they do talk contract and extend him, that they can make it work. So I don't get the feeling that it's a hot topic for Staios to address. But he also said that, that Chychrun's a really good player, and he's like, if I'm calling the Ottawa Senators, I'm going to ask about him too. Like, why wouldn't you be interested, right? So, they're going to get interest unless an offer comes in and absolutely blows them away. I think it's unlikely at the deadline. Summertime will come. They can talk extension. And I think if there is a move, it's possible one of their left D do go. And if it does, it's going to be more of a business perspective, a cap perspective, changing that dynamic and not have anything to do with a player who's unhappy, because that certainly does not appear to be the case. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around, and we'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.